Hi folks, welcome back to Cretacea Park. This episode we'll be building a habitat for an ancient grazer, as its original generic name was in Inuit. This is an Edmontosaurus species, an alternate one, and doing a little bit different in building the habitat on this one. As you can see, I already placed a bit of the building in place and have that wooden piece sticking out, and have acquired one of the animals to put in for scale. This species is not dimorphic, so both the male and females are this size. But because of that wooden platform, that's why I wanted to see how big the animal was going to be, so I could determine if the sizes were going to work out. The first part that you're watching here with me playing around with girders is an attempt to build a device for the guests to use to supply these animals with treats and also give them an interactive experience. These animals, even though they're the smallest Edmontosaurus species we have in the game, they are not small animals. And they would take hands off as well as offered treats quite easily. The lawyers don't like that for the park. So some device to let the guests have an experience of getting food to the animal without losing fingers or hands or entire small children. Not really the case for a plant eater like this, but so the idea is that wooden platform is where the food will end up. And I'm building a chute for the guests to place the food on and then send it down to the animal so that they have a safety separation. It's on a turntable type thing. The pillar would stay the same, and then it could be swiveled a bit, almost like a lettuce gun. So I'm fussing with this a bit, trying to figure out what the design's going to be with the tools we have. Obviously, at this point, we have very limited tools in the game to use to build things. And I certainly hope we'll get more. Just don't know when or what. So make do with what we got. So having built the main chute, I'm now fiddling with the girders in order to set up a sliding mechanism so that once the food is put on the chute, the guest can propel it toward the animal. And this roughly equivalent to tossing it to the animals, but that's something small children would have trouble with. But the idea here is that they would have something they could like lean their whole body weight in, and it would give it enough impetus to send the tasty vegetable treat to the animal and not endanger the child, and just, a little bit of separation from this large prehistoric animal for safety reasons. So this took a remarkable amount of fiddling to get done. I'm not 100% sure I like the final design. But it is what it is for this build. Yeah, I'll get a little handle, a little push handle on there. And it's, I guess, looking like what it's mostly going to be. Unfortunately, I managed to exit the group, so the slide and the push handle are one group, and the rest of the device and the platform is another group. So you can see me messing with trying to select things because I want to move them around. In this case, change the height of the device to make it something closer to what people could use from the platform. So at this point, you can see I've changed out the wooden thing for another kind of platform and have the feeding tray on it. That required a trick because you can't elevate the trays from the ground level. So I built up the ground level, as you can see, at the feeding station, and put the feeding tray on top of the platform by getting the terrain level to the right height. The feeding tray that's in the back there, which is intended to represent items that they can feed to the dinosaur, that required raising terrain up to the right level and flattening it out and then placing the platform up there. You can see me doing something similar at the lower platform. Having done that, it's time to keep our guests from falling into the exhibit. So it's fencing time, and I don't have a carved version of the modular fence there, so it requires making a segmented turn of the fencing around the curvature of the platform. The good thing is you only have to do it once, so you will later see me select all the pieces of this curved section and then duplicate it to finish the end of the platform. I'm not doing it all at once because I'm trying to figure out just how to build this building and how it should be. So unlike some of my other buildings where I had a pretty good idea ahead of time, this one I'm kind of making up as I go along. So having compared it to the dinosaur, I can see that, well, if that thing rears up, it could come over the railing. So made another railing on top of it to give a better platform. And the guests have to get up there, so there's the stairs, and the stairs need boundaries so that you don't see the edges that they don't have. So a little bit of concrete to make a coping similar to what's around the top of the stone wall on the platform. And need a railing, so I decided to make one. Since most of the generic railings that come with the game, they don't work well at angles, particularly at the center points. Now this wouldn't be so bad at the top of this one because I could bury it in those posts, but that doesn't answer for the other end of the railing, or in the case of my decision here, the middle of the railing, to help support that wooden rail. So I decided to use the girder and make it much smaller and put it in place to be an upright for holding the railing. And having made one, it's easy enough to duplicate and slide over to the other side of the stairs. You can see me adjusting the larger metal pillar to the height of the fence, and I wanted to do that so I could bring it over to the other side. You will find me making lots of adjustments to those pillars in the course of this build as I make other parts and discover it's really not quite working out well. So this is the process of duplicating the elements to square off, well, round off in the corner's case, but to duplicate the other side. And so I decided that this was a big enough area for the feeding station. So to start the keeper's building, which would be the major portion of this part of the structure, I started with the wall that is on the platform. And needed to have a window for the food to come out of the keeper's hut. Built the platform out of the various pieces out of the polished aluminum wall. So made a big box out of it essentially. A little door from the platform into the keeper's area with the usual window used for making a door frame. Wanted to keep it fairly simple and clean on this side. I'm anticipating that at some point the game will give us information boards for the animals, and that would be the sort of thing that would go up on those walls and provide the guests with some information about the animals that they're looking at. So having made that decision, I started to block out the building itself and get the walls all lined up and in place, and eventually at the right height. And about the time I got it all done, I realized that this didn't look quite right to me with the all of it in that wood, and it wasn't echoing the nature of trying to make the staff facilities and the keeper facilities less obvious, or maybe kind of blend more into the environment. A little hard to do with this one since it's directly facing a path. Well, you see that decision and answer in a bit. I decided there'd be a roller shutter to come down and close this window off when it's not in operation of providing the treats to be fed to the animals. So the usual trick of adjusting the size of an element to give it a very, very different character. So that was the roller shutter was a metal wall, and then by shrinking it down, the panels get thinner and it looks a little bit more like a roller shutter. I'm assuming the mechanism would be inside and you wouldn't see it. So there's my answer to making it look a little less obvious. I turned it into stone so that the stone would have a little better chance of seeming more like the environment. I mean, it's a building. The guests would know it's a building, but it's not really calling attention to itself in the same way as that wood does. So the foundation concrete makes it obvious I need stairs, but only a keeper's worth, so I can make it narrower than the stairs up to the platform. And I'm going to have to be playing with the landscape height in order to make that stairway work well with the habitat and everything around it. I decided that I was tired of the windows for this one, being the frame around the door, and there aren't a lot of other useful elements right now. I didn't want to use the metal columns, so I decided that I would try using the one, if you will, art piece rectangle that we have right now, and that's the I from the alphabet. And you can, you already figured out it's from the alphabet. You can see it down on the bottom of the screen. But the I is a very simple piece. and gives you a rectangular block you can do a lot with. I really want to not have it be the screaming bright white and that the letters come in, but that's not going to be an option until we get to recolor things, at which point I will definitely recolor this trim on this building, because that is actually fighting with the idea that it be inconspicuous, yet the building needs something to make it look more finished, and more building-like, and something more than this awning over the door. So that's working out pretty well. There's going to be some windows on the, if you will, street side of this, and again, just so it's not that solid wall of stone. And I didn't want to set this building up with all kinds of buttresses and or what have you, or other columns, because that's starting to become serious architecture that calls attention to itself, and that wasn't the intention here. So playing with the eye again, making it as big as I could on one stretch of the piece, and discovering that it didn't line up totally square. This has been an annoying thing through alpha, and I really don't know how much of it is user error and how much of it is creep in the elements that the devs haven't accounted for. If it never gets fixed, I guess we can put it down to user error. But it's very frustrating to have the angle snap on and then have the pieces go off. You have a line to surface, you have the angle snap on, and it doesn't go where it's supposed to go. It's not good quality of life. So I'm using the eye as a trim. Again, I want to not have it be that bright white. But having the trim says a lot about it being a finished building. It just makes it look better. It's obviously a fake building. There's no proper stonework quoins on the corners, but that's not a piece we have. And I haven't found a good piece yet anyway, among those available to us to set on there, even with the wonderful scaling, to create a quoin to finish off the corners of a stone building. So I decided a slanted roof would be the answer for this building. So I'm setting up the building's wall, and that leaves me the habitat side to address with the top of the thing. And I decided to bring the stone across to get more of a feel that wooden wall is a special feature in this stone building, something that's there because of the feeding platform effect, entertainment for the guests. So the roof needs to cover not just the building but also the platform. It is, after all, a tropical environment, and the occasional rain and unexpected rain will come up, and we don't really want our guests unhappy while they're trying to feed these lovely dinosaurs. And this is a case where, okay, the columns are now too short to go to the roof, now that there's a roof, and a little bit of play to bring them all to the same height and under the roof. By picking them all together, I can move them out to another support point. It makes obvious sense to have it where the roof changes order, but I don't want it out at the habitat. So it's time to put an angle brace to take the weight of the flat section of the roof. Scaling makes this so much easier. But as is often the case, I blipped too many times by shifting things around and got extra pieces, and you saw me pull them out. So I knew how many I had, and it's like 3 blips. So that was a bunch of extra pieces I was able to make go away. This is only alpha, so I could make all of the support beams to go across between the posts, but that's a lot of work, and I decided to cut it short on the and just do the 2 most obvious ones. Partly because they hide some of the work that you don't want to be seen. Particularly the angled beam. It's hard to get it to disappear as being wood flush against the roof because it's at an angle and the roof is pretty thin. So there would be other structural elements in there, but since alpha may not translate into beta and into the access version of the game, I'm only willing to do so much work in this at this stage. If it translates, I can come back and change these things. So there was an issue with the placement on some of the posts. They weren't quite in the right place, so there is a period of making some small adjustments to make sure everything is where it should be and not where it ended up. I did pull another pair of beams out there to support those corners, and since they're out in the dirt, it seemed to make sense that there should be a footer for those beams. So I elected to make that in concrete, since there's no place to bolt the standard beam foot that comes in the modular pieces. It also brings a different color and texture to the build, so it adds a little more interest. So that build is not looking too bad, but it's not where it needs to be physically. And that's something I'm going to have to address in a little bit. And kind of as the problem I had with the feeder, I ended up with a couple of different groupings of all the elements to this building and feeding platform. So I've got to catch them up and move them. The feeding troughs are just, they're not part of the regular modular elements, so they can't be part of a group. This, I believe, is connected to the fact that they are not size changeable. And that probably has to do with gameplay elements, even though that's not something we are doing right yet. So now it's time to move the building, and I want to get it at a place in the slope where a lot of the things, the stairs and the platforms, all work well enough without having to fuss too much with the landscaping. But some is inevitable, and just like the building, I'm adjusting the habitat structure as I go along. I want to have enough space around that feeding platform that the animals will fit without being awkward on the slopes, and want it just high enough to have that metal platform act like a slab, where I can put the functional feeding tray back on, so that the animals will come up there to feed and provide a simulation of this guest feeding mechanism. So it's time to move on to working on the habitat now that the functional building is made. And defining the space of it is the first element. You saw me raising ground, in a couple of places. And I'm playing with the heights of various things to get something nice, and doing a lot of the terrain painting early on, so it's not you know lawn grass. The animals are going to need a drinking pool, or possibly a place to cool off, since they like a cooler environment than most of the Edmontosaurs. This whole habitat is designed to be in a hollow. I don't want to do pits, because it's an easy way to do animals. But when you are trying to modulate temperature in the real world, particularly if you want to cool things down, having natural walls that provide insulation, like the edges of this pit, will help hold that temperature in the habitat. So this is a big thing. It's not in a complete building. So this is a way to mitigate the cost of running the coolers for this animal. Once the coolers get in the game, right now it doesn't care, so I don't have to care that much. It seems unlikely that the gameplay will require something over this to keep it cool enough. It's usually just not worth it for games. It's certainly not the case in a game like Planet Zoo. You put your temperature modulators in there, and you really don't need any insulation or cover to keep them functioning well, and they will do their thing happily without those features, whereas in the real world you'd just be burning energy. So now that I've got a habitat roughed out, I'm going to pick up some friends for our lone Edmontosaur. And while they're cooking, I'm laying in some fence to help me understand the boundary, and also reinforce the boundaries for the animals to keep them from getting out. You're going to see a big jump here. You've seen me place plants before. It's the same usual deal. And I decided to jump ahead to keep this thing a little closer. You saw the sign out front. So this is a little bit of a tour looking at what the environment is. I put some plantings in there, an implied path for the staff to get into their building that I don't want the guests using, so I'm not using an actual path. And I can see a couple of things that need a little adjustment that I'll have to come in. And I added this other section to the building, simple viewpoint with some seating that overlooks the exhibit, where you don't have to get involved with the feeding station. It also provides more viewing area for the guests. And once guests start to care about what they're looking at, we'll see how it all plays out. I may need to redefine how this building works. So you can see the guy approaching the roped off area, which is where the actual feeding things would be. I'm pleased to see he stopped at the ropes. I hope it's not just coincidence. And the big log there would be a thing that small kids could stand on to use the device, even beyond concealed rollers, of course, make it easier for the keeper who handles this thing. So a little more look at the environment with our animals in place, and that pretty much is going to wrap it up for this new animal in Cretacea Park. It was not in I didn't use it in the pre-alpha one. So if you liked it, like the video, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you in another video. Be nice to each other.